Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is to discuss Douglas Ross's fears, which I can understand, that voting for Reform UK in certain seats in Scotland could be handing SNP some seats. And he was discussing this on some interviews today, and the Express and Star, which I believe is a local newspaper, have picked up on it. And their headline is, "Campaign has been very difficult, says Scottish Tory leader amid the Reform warning." Douglas Ross said a vote for Reform UK would allow the SNP in the back door. The leader of the Scottish Tories has conceded that the party's campaign has been very difficult, but warned voters against backing Reform UK. The Conservatives, north and south of the border, have been under fire in recent weeks over Douglas Ross's decision to stand in the election instead of an ill colleague, the Prime Minister's decision to leave the D-Day commemorations early, and allegations that senior figures bet on the date of the election. These are all things that Tories have had to deal with over the last couple of weeks, and quite rightly so. Mr Ross told the BBC that voters moving across to Nigel Farage's Reform UK in Scotland would result in an easier ride for the SNP. I kind of go with that. I understand the logic and the simple arithmetic behind that. It's been very difficult, and I'm not going to shy away from that, he told the BBC's Sunday show. I put myself forward for interviewing knowing that a number of these issues would come up. But I'm also out indoors speaking to voters here in the North East and across the country and hearing that they are annoyed, upset and disappointed with the SNP government that's been in charge for 17 years. Yeah, you're no kidding, Dougie. And I think that's why the SNP, they've just ran their course in Holyrood, and I think the same can be said for the Tories down in Westminster, but they're, 11, 12 years of power. People just get a bit fed up, and I think that's what's going to hurt both parties this election. Voters are upset at Scottish Government's record in health, education, he said. Mr Ross announced his decision to stand in Aberdeenshire North and Moray East seat 2 weeks ago after former MP David Duguid was ruled out by party bosses over concerns about his health. The announcement sparked a backlash, including briefings from inside the Scottish Tories to the media, which resulted in Mr Ross saying he would stand down as party leader after election and would resign as an MSP if he wins the seat. Despite the troubles his party has faced, the outgoing leader has warned against splitting the vote. What Farage risks doing here is letting the SNP in, he said. And I agree with that. This is something you need to listen to, because in key seats, a vote for reform will simply let the SNP in the back door. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of that, and the risk that they will wake up on the July 5th with an SNP politician because reform votes have allowed it to happen. Now, at this stage, I must say, I don't disagree with Reform as a party. I don't disagree with the leader. I don't disagree with their manifestos and many of the points raised. However, the facts are they will not win a seat in Scotland. Not in this election anyway. And anybody that votes for them is probably likely to come from a Tory vote. I'm not saying it's unique to Tory votes, but they will attract the majority of people voting for them away from Tories. And there are a handful of seats in Scotland where the Tories can give the SNP a bloody nose, or at least a damn good fight. If people vote for reform in lieu of Conservatives in some sort of protest vote because they're not happy with Rishi Sunak or anything, then it will help the SNP. And on the 5th of July, if you wake up and the SNP have won your constituency and it was one where the Tories did have a chance, and you add the Tory and the Reform vote together and it would have given the Tories more than the SNP, then you've caused it. It's as simple as that. That's the truth of the reality. It might not be pleasant to hear, might not be pleasant to say, but that'll be the harsh reality. So anybody considering voting for reform has got to consider the outcome. And in ones where Tories have no chance of winning, like the most of them, where Labour look likely to either win or be second placed, then if you really don't like the SNP and you really don't like the Tories, then by having a protest vote, I'm determined I'm going to just vote for reform, and it's going to have no positive outcome at all to the result of the election, then you need to reconsider. Because I couldn't bear waking up on the 5th of July to find out I had an SNP candidate successful and is now my MP when I voted for anyone other than the people best placed to dethrone them. I just couldn't sit myself, and that's easy for me because I don't like any political party, so I can tick a box in any, knowing fine well that it's not my favourite anyway, because none of them are favourites. I just don't like the system, I don't like the process. So it's very easy for me to do, and I understand that a lot of people find it unpalatable for voting Labour in seats where they're the best for tactical voting, and likewise voting for Conservative where in seats that they'll be the best tactical vote. I understand that. It still doesn't mean it's right. Just hold your nose and do it. Because if you wake up in the morning with an MP from the SNP, is that no worse than having one for another party? Because there's nobody I dislike more than the SNP. So, and I do understand it's like, what's the difference? You're either voting for a job or a shite. I get that. But I just wouldn't sleep well knowing that I'd voted for someone to come third or lower in a run against the SNP. So, make it a two-party process. Make it SNP versus whoever's best placed to compete against them and see what happens. Could easily, if you look at the simple mathematics of it, dethrone the SNP from every seat in Scotland, but that won't happen. I know that won't happen. So we have to try and make it happen as many as possible. And why am I so pro-tactical voting? Well, it's dead simple. I know fine well simple maths, and I know fine well if we were to bring their income down from the currently 1.2 million they're getting short money and the £500,000 they get through their ministerial levy, which is money they take off all their members of parliament. If we could make that zero, they would stop running as an organisation the next day. That isn't practical. That's not going to happen. So we have to make it as little a number as possible. And we half their seats, we half their income. It's a direct correlation on the bottom line of their accounts. And let me remind you, the last set of published accounts, they lost £800,000 and they had about 50 grand in the bank. Right? And they still owe Peter some money, according to the last accounts. So that's where they are financially. And we as Scottish electorate have a fantastic opportunity to actually bankrupt them. And through this election, and if need be the next Holyrood election, my notion is to tactically vote them to death. And if that means I need to hold my nose and vote for someone I don't really like, I'm prepared to do that. Are you? So that's where we are. As I said earlier, in another video, I'll be doing some tactical voting videos coming up, and I will be on Twitter Space on Thursday night by the great ex-Twitter host Basil the Great, and we will be discussing and debating and taking questions on tactical voting and the possibilities if the Scottish electorate can hunt the SNP at Westminster, and what that would look like for the SNP going forward. And it's fantastic. So, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. But most importantly of all, unless you're SNP, unless you're John Swinney, unless you're any of their ever-decreasing cult members, everyone else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.